you
yes,
for that.
I think it's working now. Bonnie Bishop
Yeah.
live in Studio B at WNCW. Our live Studio B sessions on WNCW are made possible by Sierra Nevada Brewing Company. Big thanks to them, and big thanks to Bonnie and the band for coming in on what is got to be an early thing. But the caffeine seems to be working pretty well. Congratulations on the new album.
Thank you
Really
very
the
much.
best thing you have ever done to my ears.
Thank you.
Ain't Who I Was, the name of it. It's fresh out in the stores. Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
Not even a month old.
Yeah, and Mercy, one of the tracks from
Yeah,
it. As best I could tell, this album is kind of one of the stories of Phoenix rising from the ashes. I mean,
Yeah.
the word is you were kind of ready to toss the music thing aside and instead off you go to grad school.
Yeah, well, I was there, man. I had done it. I'd been on the road for 12 years, made 5 albums, lived out of that 16-passenger van, and I still didn't have a label support or a solid booking agent or a manager, and I just felt like I can't do this by myself anymore. So I had in early 2014, I went home to Texas for a year, came off the road, ended up getting into creative writing just to keep my mind from going insane, and it was writing stories and realized I had all these great things that had happened over the last 12 years. And I came to see it not as a failure, but just kind of, the toughness of the business. And I, got to a point where I was okay with whatever the plan was for my life. And, went back to graduate school and was kind of going down that road when I got the call to go make this record. So that was an opportunity I thought I shouldn't pass up on.
Well, I think everybody's thankful you took advantage.
I think everybody in this room is happy.
Is the deal along the way? I think I heard that you were dropping some little demo things, but it was for the fans. Is that correct?
Yeah. So I was doing, when I came off the road, I didn't know how I was going to make a living. And one thing is I rented out my apartment on Airbnb in Nashville and was making some money there. And then I developed this story and song series. I was trying to find a way to marry, I've been a songwriter. People have known me as a singer, but now I've got to transition into a new chapter of my life. And, I'm interested in this creative writing path. How do I take my fans, my songwriting fans with me? So I put together this series where I released once a month for a year. I released a new song, like from my old catalog, things that I'd never recorded, and a few things I had recorded, but new recordings of them, acoustic recordings. And then I also wrote and narrated the stories behind each of the songs. And a couple of those demos I sent to my friend David Macias, who owns 30 Tigers Records.
Right.
And told him, I was trying to do something new, that I'd left the music business and whatever. And he was like, well, these songs, you got a couple songs in here that are really good. And I don't think you're done. I think you just haven't been able to make a record that really showed the world who you are. And I think that you need to work with a great producer. And he was the one that suggested Dave Cobb.
Right.
So he sent those demos to Dave Cobb. And 2 years later, here we are.
So for listeners out there that may not know the name, Dave Cobb has been producing some rather spectacular work from a whole bunch of big names in the business these days.
Absolutely.
And he obviously had ears for your material. Was his comment something along the lines that you should have been singing soul music?
Well, yeah, he pretty much, he only heard 2 acoustic demos, just me on my guitar, which I'm not that great of a guitar player. But he heard it in my voice, and when we sat down for lunch that day, I had heard Sturgill's record, and I'd heard Jason Isbell's record that Cobb
Both
had
produced
done.
by Cobb.
But he hadn't put out Stapleton's record, although when we went to lunch, the one time that I sat down with Cobb before we went into the studio was this one lunch, and he was working on Chris Stapleton's record at that time. And I said, I loved, Jason's record and Sturgill's record. I just am not sure that that's me. Like, I don't know that you're the right producer for me if those are the kind of records you're making. And he laughed at me and he was like, well, I wouldn't make a country record on you because you're not a country singer. You're a soul singer. So I thought that was very intuitive.
Did you grok that? I mean, in the
I
past,
loved
did
that.
you ever consider
it
yourself?
gave me a lot of hope because I had always I'd grown up listening to soul music, and that's what I loved, like, the Motown stuff and Etta James and Otis Redding and that stuff. And then grown up in Mississippi, in my high school years, so I had a lot of that influence. But because I was living in Texas and trying to make a living in the live music scene there, it was definitely aired on the countryside, we were trying to sell beer in dance halls and stuff.
That's right.
Keep people, two-stepping. So I had, always been chasing after, this sound that would fit, how to bring parts of myself into a scene that, was already existing and figuring out how I would make a living there. And so I kind of felt like I always compromised. I never made a record where I said, if there was no genre, if I didn't have to worry about radio or what anybody thought, what kind of record would I make? And essentially that's what I got to do with Dave Cobb, because he doesn't obey any rules, and he doesn't contrive records for radio. He looks at an artist and who they are, and he tries to pull the soul of a record out of the artist, and I think he did that with me.
Well, he certainly did.
Yeah, and I'm really glad.
Well, it's an interesting parallel. I just had Frazee Ford in the studio a few days ago, and she went through a very similar experience,
Really?
Where she had done all this work with Be Good Tanya's, but she also grew up with a big soul background in her family, and it took a chance, a hookup with the high rhythm section from Memphis, and all of a sudden, here's this blossoming soul singer.
Crazy,
so
right?
Yeah, it must have been very uneasy for you stepping in. I mean, you've tossed away the music thing. And it seems
and
like
even
you're
sold
kind of
my van.
Yeah,
which
you're
was the big part. Yeah,
easing back into it, and here's this producer saying, "No, we're going to take you in a different direction." He must have inspired a lot of trust and faith in you.
Well, let me put it this way, Scotty. If I hadn't spent a year and a half letting go of everything that I thought I was and everything I thought I knew, I wouldn't have been able to make that record with Dave. So it was the perfect timing for me personally, and for the style of producer he is. And I'm just really glad that God had humbled me to the point that I could turn myself over in the studio like that, because it was a great result.
There's some truth.
Really happy with that.
Tip of the hat to Dave Cobb. We're talking with Bonnie Bishop here in Studio B. You guys got another tune?
Yeah.